Glenn Youngkin is actually keeping one of his promises. One of his promises is that he is not going to allow transgender policy to change how children go to school. So what he means by this is that he is no longer going to allow people who simply identify as a member of the opposite sex to walk into the bathrooms at public schools. And this follows hot on the heels of a story that was largely broken by the Daily Wire, in which a student dressed in a skirt allegedly went into a girl's bathroom and sexually assaulted a girl. And then was told by the school board in Loudoun County this sort of stuff never happens. If you have transgender bathrooms, it really is no problem whatsoever. So Glenn Youngkin has now changed the policy, and he has gone back to the original policy, which until the last 5 minutes was considered not only normal, but perfectly logical, that boys should go pee-pee in the boys' room and girls should go pee-pee in the girls' room, and that boys should not go pee-pee in the girls' room just because they say that they are boys, and that girls should not go pee-pee in the boys' room because they're not capable of using the urinal. I mean, like, this is really not difficult stuff, but apparently it's now driving outsized outrage. So according to BuzzFeed News, students at almost 100 schools in Virginia on Tuesday participated in walkouts to protest a proposed policy put forward by Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin that would heavily restrict the rights of transgender students in public. How about the rights of girls not to be in a bathroom with a teenage boy? That seems like a pretty big right, but apparently no right to privacy for girls who actually would like to, go to the bathroom in peace, to have a teenage boy in there saying he's a girl. No, they have no rights. It's only this particular set of people who apparently has rights. Under the new policy, parents would be given the decision-making power about whether their child expresses a gender that differs with their child's sex while at school and what pronouns their child uses at school, because this is the other part of the policy the left really objects to. The left would like to kidnap your children and allow the teachers at the NEA to explain to your kids that they actually are a member of the opposite sex, to socially transition them at school and to never tell you. This is the left's actual position. Okay, this is the position of people who are opposing Youngkin's policy, because all Youngkin's policy says is that if a kid comes to school and says, I'm Bob, but I'd like to be called Jill, that you have to call the parents and tell them. Apparently, this is very bad according to the left. You should socially transition them at school. And if you refuse to socially transition them, then this means that you're a bigot. And you should definitely not tell the parents, because you never know. Bob might go home and mom and dad might take out the belt. So the teachers are your real parents. Randy Weingarten is really your parent. Horrific, childless Randy Weingarten, who again, is... her relationship to children over the past couple of years has been to simply prevent them from going to school and wreck their lives and force them to wear masks at 2 years old. She should be in charge of your children. That is the person who matters most of all. The proposal says that a student's legal name and sex cannot be changed without an official legal document or court order, which makes a lot of sense, right? You can't just come in and tell the teachers one day that you should be called Jim and your new name will be Trans Dinosaur, and they just start calling you that stuff. Instead, you actually have to go through a legal process to change your name, like you would in a normal country. And the policy says that teachers and other school officials must refer to each student using only the pronouns appropriate to the sex appearing in the student's official record. In other words, if the student comes in and says, I'm a Jim, and the teacher looks at you and you're a boy, the teacher is perfectly well within his rights and should, in fact, call you he, him. Transgender students would also be forced to use school facilities that match the sex assigned to them at birth. So the original policy from Democratic Governor Ralph Northam, who is quite fond of the idea that abortion should be allowed up to and including apparently after birth, allowed schools to let students use their chosen names and pronouns that reflect their gender identity without needing any legal documentation. So a bunch of these students walked out. All that's happening right here is that a bunch of teachers who work for the NEA decided to rabble-rouse among the students. Then the students are like, hey, I get out of class. This is how protests work, by the way, when you're in high school. Very few of these students are really, really involved with these issues. The number of trans students in Virginia is vanishingly low. But if you can get a teacher to excuse you from class, are you going to go or are you not going to go? Are you going to stay in class and do your math homework? Or are you actually going to, walk out of the school and pretend that you're a social justice warrior? According to BuzzFeed News, so often in issues around education, students are excluded from the conversation, especially queer students. Yes, if there's one thing we know about America, it's that LGBTQ people don't get enough media coverage. They've totally been excluded from the conversation. They're utterly silent in our media landscape. This is according to 17-year-old Casey Calabia, who helped organize and participated in the walkout on Tuesday. Getting this opportunity to have people listen to what we have to say all across Virginia is really imperative to making sure we're not excluded from conversations that will quite literally change our day-to-day lives. Now, it is not just a bunch of foolish youngsters who are walking out of class to protest this, or their teachers, as pushed by the National Education Association of the American Federation of Teachers, run by people, again, like Randy Weingarten. It is also the actual White House of the United States. And this is the important thing to remember when it comes to social policy of the left in the United States. It is promoted at the most radical levels by the most radical people with the most radical power. I mean, you're talking about the president of the United States promoting the idea that if your 15-year-old girl goes to school and she's gender confused for any reason whatsoever, because she's been watching TikTok, she goes to school and she says, I wish to be treated as a member of the opposite sex. All of the teachers, all the other students should be forced to say that she is a boy, and parents should not be told about this because, after all, the parents might be. This is like the policy of the White House in the United States. And here's Karine Jean-Pierre saying just that yesterday.
Students across Virginia today walked out of their classroom to protest the governor's new guidelines restricting the rights of transgender students. Does the White House support these students?
We believe, and he believes, transgender youth should be allowed to be able to go to school freely, to be able to express themselves freely, to be able to have the protections that they need to be who they are. Again, I have not seen these reports, but we can say with all confidence, and you all know, have covered him for some time. When it comes to this community, he is a partner and he is a strong ally.
Okay, so parents should not be part of the conversation. Teachers, Joe Biden should be your old grandpa telling you that you're actually a member of the opposite sex. Glenn Youngkin, new governor of Virginia, elected on precisely this basis. Glenn Youngkin, he came back at this pretty easily. He's like, so basically you're saying you want to cut parents out of the loop.
If you're against the guidelines, it means you're against having parents involved in students' lives. And I don't think that's where Virginia is. Virginia spoke loudly last year in our election that parents were really important to have involved in kids' lives. And so I think this is a chance for us to reflect, please read the guidelines, and then work towards making sure that we do include parents in these fundamentally important decisions.
Okay, but the fact is that our elite caste in the United States, they actually just believe that they should be able to run social policy top down. And this isn't just true for social policy. It's obviously true for economic policy as well. The only problem is they've botched it every way it is possible to botch this thing. So on the domestic front, obviously, you've seen the Federal Reserve keep these inflation rates incredibly high by keeping the interest rates incredibly low for far too long. And this has now led them to have to ramp up those interest rates really fast. And this means, of course, that we are likely to see a significantly harder landing than would otherwise be the case. And they're going to have to ramp it up even faster. According to Susan Collins, the new president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, Wall Street Journal reporting, she said she is committed to bringing inflation down to 2%, even if it means slowing the economy. Collins, in her first public remarks as Boston Fed leader, said Monday she supported further interest rate increases as projected by Federal Reserve officials last week. They showed the central bank raising aggressively through next year despite rising fears of an economic slowdown or recession. She said in a speech prepared for delivery Monday at the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, quote, accomplishing price stability will require slower employment growth and a somewhat higher unemployment rate. Returning inflation to target will require further tightening of monetary policy. She said history has shown price stability is a precondition to achieving maximum employment over the medium and longer term. This, of course, is exactly right. The only problem is that this would have been completely unnecessary if it hadn't been for the Federal Reserve botching this thing and for the Biden administration pouring money, just pouring it almost physically into the American economy. Alrighty, guys, we have run out of time. We're going to be getting into a lot more, including the left's reaction to the right's reaction, namely everyone we don't like is a fascist. You're not going to want to miss it. Click the link in the description and join us.